battles. And all those arrows are the army movements. And those squares is the location of where, how many, which troop, in where, what date, and how many Tibetans were Jianglin. I have to explain that name, that term. How many Tibetans involved in it. So, and this shows major fighting area. And this is a pocket of people. Is the enemy, meaning the Tibetan militia or just tribal people. And this is how two troops going together, go in that direction. And this is the area of army, Chinese army stationed. Okay, this map is in central Tibet. And this is 1959 and 1960. Again, this is the time. The name of the area is called the major battles. For instance, this is called the number 3 area. And Nanchuo, Battle of Nanchuo. And the Battle of numbers 2, etc. And all those are the dates of it. And you can see those are the series of fighting there. Okay, this is we know this is a map of the Sichuan to Lhasa Tibet highway. And during the wartime, this is meant to be a military road to begin with. And we can see the function during the war. This square, this is Chengdu, this is Lhasa. All those little squares, these are the army hospital, military hospital. And this is the general one here in Lhasa and the general one in Chengdu. And you can count on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 military hospitals alone used during the war. And those are little signs meaning gas station. And those are the army station. And it gives you each place, Jammu, and from Chengdu, Ganzi, Gantok, Toba, Chengdu, all the way to Lhasa. And all those, it tells you here is a company, and here you have a division station, something like that. It's very detailed. There's the military gathering, how transportation, etc. Now, this is evidence of Air Force. This is the leaflet spread from the airplane, and it's in Chinese and Tibetan. And you can read that. It's threatening if you don't put down weapons, we're going to bomb you. And this is a picture taken from the Tupolev 4. Supposedly this is a rebel headquarters, but you can see it's more likely it's a monastery. Here looks like a stupa to me, and this is center of maybe a center of the town, and there's a stupa here. But this is a Tupolev picture, and this is one of the army air force that participated in the war. During the 6 years of war, the Air Force had over 3,000 flights. And what did they do? They bombed, they transported, they airdropped supplies, and they used machine guns to shoot the escaping tribes. So I'm not going to go more details, but I just tell you this is not only a regular war. It's a Air Force and the cavalry, and what do you call the two-dimensional kind of war. And by the way, that's the first one PRA ever fought had such a war. Is in Tibetan area. In Korea, they didn't have the air coverage, but in Tibet they did. Now, the army, PRA units involved. Here is in each place. I go by province. Those are the regiments, divisions. I have actually much more detail than this in each area, which units with their number. But I'm not going to go that detail. And those are the militia participated. I'm very much on the conservative side because I don't want to over-exaggerate. For instance, in Sichuan, this is the number given in a secret document that has never been declassified, formally declassified. But you can see in Qinghai, the regiment use is more or less, is actually more than that. But I estimated for this number is definitely more than that. So I came out a total of this number of military force used during in the 6 years. I have to say, this means the army doesn't mean head count. It means the military force used in different areas, but it's the same too. Some of them, not all. But militia, I think, is the head count because there's no evidence the militia from Gansu used in Sichuan. I think they don't cross region, but the army did. They cross region. Okay, the casualty. I have to explain the word 歼灭. 歼灭 in Chinese doesn't mean all killed. It means killed, surrendered, wounded, and arrested. Basically meaning to demobilize you, so you cannot fight anymore. Also, this is compiled from military sources. I'm also on the conservative side because in Sichuan it's much more than that. But it's Sichuan that they use the in Sichuan not only Tibetans fought, also the Yi people, Yi people fought. So I took out the numbers that most likely is not Tibetans, so so we can go closer. This is only in Gansu. I don't have any information on Ngaba. So that's why I don't calculate the general because it would be misleading. And this number come up about somewhere 15% of the total population at that time, Tibetan population at that time. And this is a conservative one. And this is only in the battlefield. That doesn't include anyone later on died in prison. Doesn't include anyone who were wounded then later died. Or they escaped then died. Or they died in the escape route or nothing. Those are all compiled from the battlefield. Okay. There's also an army, PRA casualty. I'm not sure if those all soldiers died in the battlefield or they also included people, the soldiers died because of elevation sickness. It could be both, but this is what in each province, that's how many soldiers died during the war. We can see that's a quite a serious thing. Okay, not only the battleground, there's also statistics of Tibetans put in jail. This I go by much more details. And not only province, it's also all the Tibetan areas which I can find statistics on, but I exclude Haidong is the area prefecture district next to Xining, close to Xining. The reason for that is because it's a mixed nationality. I'm not sure from the total number how many Hui, how many Tibetans, so I excluded them. And those I know for I know for sure, or at least I'm more comfortable. Those are Tibetan, number of Tibetans being arrested and put in jail. So this came out for this number, and I have to say, there's an overlap from the previous table, because almost all the people arrested on the battleground were jailed, but much more than that. When we get to the local level, what does that mean? Those are the numbers come from 3 counties in Gulag. And when you see a general picture, let's say about 10% or 15% of one prefecture. But when you come to the local level, it's much higher. If you go to tribal level, will be even higher than that. For this, we can see 18%, nearly 19% of people in population in Machuen was in jail. And this come out very high, but this is all the openly published materials, figures. So I'm not sure whatever it is true or not, but this is what we can find. Now, the population loss is difficult to study. I think many people tried. The difficulty is, let me show you the example. This is Central Tibet, TR. This is the internal reference, Xinhua She Neibu Cankao. It's on the very high level. It's published, it's April 21st, 1959. Here it says, Tibet, include Chengdu, the total population is about 1 million. But here, this book published in 1988, it says come out this number. Which one is closer to the truth? But I would consider this one more likely to be the Tibetan population, and this one including everyone there, including army, cadres, everyone. Why I would trust this more? Remember the dates, and we remember there's a famous letter written by Mao Zedong to Wang Feng, dated April 17th, 1959. He requested information about Tibet. And I consider this one is one of the answers to his question. So the information sent to Mao, I don't think those people have the guts, at least at that time, to cheat him. So I consider this one more likely to be closer to reality. Now, based on that, I came out a few local, which is more accurate. Those are the number on, let's say, Gannan. This covers 10 years. We have this loss and the Sichuan. Whenever possible, I try to go close to the event, because 10 years could be misleading. You know, if sometimes you see the 10-year population table, you would have increase all the time from 10 years, from 56 to 64. You will see the general increasing. That might be a hole hiding in the middle. That doesn't reflect in the 10-year. So I try to go closer to the event, if possible. Jekudo, Yushu, has the highest death toll. Why is that? the army fought in Jakuto is the strongest, most powerful army, which is commanded by General Ding Shen with Sichuan. They came directly from Korea. And the actual army, the troop fought there is Division 134. They came in May 1958, straight from Korea, and went to Lanzhou. In Lanzhou, the elevation was about 12 or 1500, the height. So they had training there. And after a few months of training, they were dispatched to somewhere close to Xining. The elevation was another stage higher. And they trained there for a few more months, climbing mountains. So the army was very much used to the elevation. So when they were dispatched, I think in August in 1958 to Jakuto. And so they are very well trained. They are very well battle hardened. They've been fighting several years in Korea. So they're non-stop fighting. So this army fought the battles in Jakuto. And they're practically butchers. They just kill everyone. And especially the commander of the local Jakuto military subdivision, he personally, I think his name is Sun Guang, he personally ordered the execution of prisoners. About the number I know is 128. He personally ordered the execution of prisoners. So that came out, Jakuto, the death toll is very high. Golok is also very high, but it's difficult to determine because there's evidence that the population of Golok has been changed several times. So they came out 1953 population base. You would have different time have different figures. So I skip that. I show you the ones here. Qinghai had a few major battles that involved a large number, over 10,000 people involved. So the death rate came out very high. Now another question, are those deaths considered war deaths or famine deaths? Because in Tibetan area, the wartime overlap with the famine time. It can be debated, but as far as I know, through my extensive interviews of the survivors, majority of the people died in prison, not died in famine. And all those in prison, they were taken into prison because of as war prisoners, even though they are not in the strictly sense of like army, but they were taken as war prisoners. So they were died as war prisoners in jail. So you can decide whether as a war death or famine death, but it doesn't matter. Ultimately they died, and the death rate is very high. That's what we know for sure. Okay, so I'm on time. Okay, that's all. And I would say all those figures, all those statistics coming from Chinese source, because I mostly work on Chinese sources. And the book I'm currently writing is about this war. I'll have much more details on that. Okay, thank you.
I want to just express to you how unique this material is. We all have read about raids and skirmishes, but to actually understand this as a kind of war and be able to look at the whole picture of what it was like that whole period in these different areas, and to have Chinese statistics for doing that, this is unique. We've never really been able to access before. I'm very thrilled that Jianglin has very generously offered to share many of her materials with the library here at Columbia, the Star East Asian Library, for our archive that Dr. Hartley is currently working on. We're going to try and actually try to find funding to help do a research project with Jianglin on these and other topics. Finally, we're looking to Professor Grunfeld for his thoughts about what we've heard.
Well, that's a tough act to follow because, in fact, those are astonishing documents. Having spent 30 years, 40 years trying to find Chinese documents, to see those things is really quite amazing. I'm not quite sure why I'm on this panel. I'm not really a local historian, and when I first began interest. No. As I said, I'm not quite sure why I'm on this panel. I don't do local history. And when I first began interested in Tibet in the 1960s, there was no local history. And it's only in the last 10 or 15 years that we've been able to find out how really complicated the histories of the areas of Kham and Amdo have been, and I have been delighted just reading all of these histories over the last few years. And of course their experiences are radically different from central Tibet. I mean, just based on the simple fact that in central Tibet there was very little connection with Chinese. There were never more than a few hundred Chinese ever in central Tibet, but the people in Amdo and Kham obviously interacted with Chinese over hundreds of years, and the Rinpoche mentioned the battles that were fought over all that period, sometimes the Chinese winning, sometimes the Tibetans winning, and so on. This map, this wonderful map that I show whenever I have a chance to show it, shows the extent of the unrest and the failure of these policies. The policies of repression that we're seeing now in Kirti Monastery, but also in Lhasa as well, clearly have failed, as has the policy of pumping enormous amounts of money into Tibet in order to make material life better, although material life has in fact gotten better for many Tibetans. That doesn't solve the problem. When the underlying problem hasn't been poverty, it's been cultural security. In terms of the repression, I was in Lhasa about 10 weeks ago, and I was struck by what I saw in the Tibetan areas of Lhasa. There were certainly police officers in uniform, as there always were, and there are cameras, as there always were. But also, this time, there were plainclothes security officials wearing jeans and T-shirts. How did I know that they were security officials? Because they were wearing guns. They had sidearms, holsters, guns. The average Chinese tourist does not carry guns. So one can assume, I think, quite safely. But the thing that was really striking was that in every single street leading to the Tibetan area, there were military. Whether they were PLA or People's Armed Police, I never could quite clear, but what you see is soldiers with helmets, bulletproof vests, battle gear, AK-47s, 6 to 8 on every single street leading to the quarter. In addition to that, there's sharpshooters on the roofs. In addition to that, you have groups of 5, 6, 7, 8 of these soldiers marching back and forth in battle uniform with their guns. And so it's an armed camp, and I think this speaks partially to this sense of the government thinking that repression is going to work, but I think it also speaks to the insecurity of the Chinese government, that they feel they need that level of repression in order to prevent these kinds of revolts. So if that's happening in Lhasa, I can only imagine what's happening in eastern Tibet, where I have never been. They've never allowed me to go there, so I can only know from other people's accounts. Let me just say one other thing. I'm grateful to Robbie for reminding me of that Mao quote about foreign debt in Red Star over China, not over Asia. It's Battle of Asia. He wrote another book called Battle for Asia and Red Star over China. But what's interesting about that foreign debt, and maybe he was being facetious, I'm not sure, but if we look at what happened in 1950 when the PLA arrived in Lhasa, the Chinese wrote up a document called the 17-Point Agreement for the Peaceful Liberation of Tibet. This is a treaty. You read the terms of this agreement, it's a treaty designed to slowly assimilate Tibet into the Chinese state. And the curious thing is, why did Mao want a treaty? He had no treaty for any other part of China, they just simply incorporated it. And I think that it goes to this foreign debt notion, that Mao understood that Tibet really was a different place. And it was so different that it needed a treaty to bring it into China. One of the things that, as we're learning more about the local areas, one of the things that we don't know a great deal about is the involvement of the United States government through the CIA in Qinghai province. We know things about what happened in central Tibet and eastern Tibet, not because the CIA has released documents, because they haven't, they refuse to, but because former agents of the CIA who were involved in these operations have written memoirs. And so we have their memories of those things. But we do know, for example, that there was a CIA agent in 1949, 1950, living in Xining, and was in fact the first CIA agent to die in the line of duty. He was killed by Tibetan soldiers in 1950, a guy named McKiernan. And one of his jobs, he was there for various reasons, but one of his jobs was to try to get the local people, and we don't know who, Kazakhs, Uyghurs, Tibetans, we just don't know, but to get them to revolt against the coming communist armies. And we also have circumstantial evidence of airdrops into that region by the CIA in the early 50s. It's circumstantial, there are no documents, but there's certainly a great deal of hints of this. And so there are layers to this history, and Professor Li has brought out some of these documents. This is wonderful, and hopefully these other layers will come out, and we'll know more and more about this local history.
Thank you very much. We have 15 minutes, just over 15 minutes left for questions. So please ask questions or make comments, but please keep them very brief because the time is very short. We also have to allow translation time for Rinpoche. First question.
Yes.
Can you speak up?
This is Li Jianglin. Was Deng Xiaoping still in charge when the period you covered took place?
Yes.
Yes.
Actually, Deng Xiaoping's role is still questionable. We know there's evidence he actually did a lot of work. He actively participated on all the decision-making process, but probably because of his position now, a lot of things being covered up.
Please. Yes.
Well, I'm not sure who to direct the question to, but mainly is could someone develop a bit more about the younger generation in Tibet, well, in the Tibetan region in general? How has the government's policy of, well, massive investment, massive migration of Han ethnicity people to these areas, how has that influenced younger generations, and how do they perceive themselves as Tibetan or as Chinese?
Yeah, well, let's Mr. Benno Weiner.
I mean, I don't really know how to answer that question. It's obviously a very large question, and we're talking about many different places here. My experiences in Amdo, and particularly in Xining, among students in particular who are in some ways have been bettered by the Chinese state, is that there's a great deal of ambivalence and even antagonism towards that state, partially because of the development of a Tibetan national identity, which I think since at least in the last several decades is very strong in eastern Tibet, and also partially because quite often, even though they're being given opportunities to study, for example, and to live in the big city and all this, there's not a lot of economic benefits, not a lot of opportunities after they graduate. So you have a lot of very well-educated young Tibetan people in and around Xining who don't have a lot of prospects beyond that. They speak wonderful English, they have gone through the Chinese schooling system, but then they can't find jobs. If they're lucky, they'll find a job as a tour guide or a translator. But they're not really, for the most part, active in the larger economy. They're not getting jobs as economists and whatever it is. They're very much segregated into sort of the Tibetan economy, I would say.
로송 시신부 시부지 땅에 범망 도란 자리는 폐매에 대해서 시비자돼요.
The Chinese have directed a lot of investment into Tibet, but it has not helped the local people, and that's very clear.
배나 보유 관계 난주잖아 형게 누시위 땅샤데 전부다 이거를 해서 가르치에르스네 그런 게 문제게 돼야 말해야 돼 그런 kelenge 보면은 마페베도 그 kelenge.
As Hu Yaobang asked, was the money thrown into the river? It's very clear from his question, and he admitted the fact that the money wasn't reaching the Tibetan people.
아니 지가 보정부터가 범일라 보정부터네 종식을 되지나 그래서 그 편배에 있네요. 레게지서 국가 말아 차대요. 신지소가.
And as far as education is concerned, there is a serious lack of good education for the Tibetans, and of course, after they graduate, there is no work opportunity for them.
바지 남바스 챔비르서 모두 그지 레공 그쇼라 암도 레공 그쇼라 안에 라브라만 보시오지가 가도 법선 신다되게 돼 버게나 조샤데 통구 이어스나 그제니만 공부를 해야 돼.
Most of you might already know, in Repkong, there was outcry from the students who said that they wanted to study, who said they wanted Tibetan medium education and they wanted to study all the other subjects in Tibetan.
갑질라 가서 되게 제기도 파주리스 고들라와 때는 뭐고지에.
Their protest was against government plans that were being planned to turn this Tibetan medium education into Chinese medium education.
제상 고소 레와시에 슈어르데 레와나지 좀비야 말을 가상이제 니만 니 공데라 아니 고소 탁주지는 porque jambat mato senta topsen yongdo jaido chue yin 탁주지.
And their protest at that time was to appeal to the Chinese government to continue the Tibetan medium education, but their appeal has not been successful. Some days ago, we learned that the Chinese government is now going to impose Chinese medium education in all subjects except for Tibetan language itself. And this incident has left a scar on the hearts of these young Tibetans. So this is the situation in all of Tibet. The students have to learn Chinese language. They have to learn to read and write Chinese language. And if they don't learn the Chinese education, then they are of no use. There's no value. As far as the Chinese money is concerned, the money that has gone into housing, it is the Chinese who are in these houses who end up using most of this construction money rather than the Tibetans. And and the money that has been used to the construction of schools, in these schools there is more Chinese students than Tibetan students. And on paper, there is a lot of special educational opportunities for Tibetans, but these opportunities generally get taken up and used up by the children of the TAR officials, of the Chinese officials themselves.
Yeah.
I should mention one positive thing, important to remember. In the last few weeks, the new party secretary in Lhasa, in the Tibet Autonomous Region, has decided that all university graduates from Tibet University this year are given jobs. This is quite new and has relieved a lot of stress for those people, and I think it's rather welcomed in Lhasa. But of course, we don't know what jobs they will get. Probably, maybe not very good ones. This is in line with a national concern about security issues in China as a whole from unemployed graduates. But the problem for those Tibetan graduates is they have to study in the university in Chinese language. There's no Tibetan medium education in the TAR, never really has been since the 80s. So, and their Chinese tends to be rather weak and not competitive. So this is a double-edged problem, hard to solve now for the government. Next question, please. Please.
Well, thank you for giving me.
Speak loudly.
Yes. Thank you for giving this great detail about history. I know that we actually learned this from class. From when 1949, when He Long enters Tibet, he actually asked the Tibetology in Naixia to give him advice how to go to Tibet. And this advice he gave is to, in order to rule the Tibetans, you have to not learn from Zhao Erfeng, instead you should learn from Yuan Hui. And this quote is still frequently quoted by, right now, the party cadres in Tibet. Can you elaborate more on what this strategy means?
Basically, learn from Tsar Feng meaning you do that by force. Liu Wenhui, he converted himself into a Buddhist. He's going around with praying wheel.
In the 1930s.
In the 1930s, Liu Wenhui. So basically, it's assimilation by force or assimilation by slow process, soft or hard. Basically, that's what that means. But unfortunately, there's no way they can learn from Liu Wenhui because the policy just goes against it. Because first of all, the Chinese policy, if you look around a longer time period, not only the Tibetan monasteries were all destroyed, all the Chinese monasteries, all the temples destroyed too, because that goes against the basic belief system. You cannot keep different system in the communist regime. The communist China, you cannot do, as I think Zhou Lai in 1956 had a speech. He said that clearly. You cannot, in a socialist country, you cannot have a part of China keep the slave system. What are you going to do with that? So sooner or later, they will have to do this. Even if they want to, they can't. Basically, that was the case. And Tsar Feng, unfortunately, he was the first one died in Qinghai Commune. And let me just mention one more thing. The China and the Tibet relationship is very ambiguous, even in the Kuomintang time. I have found a few documents in Taiwan, the declassified documents, when the guy Wu Zhouxing, head of Mongolian Tibetan community.
In 1940.
Yeah, in 1939 or something, he went to Lhasa, so-called to conduct an installment. He had a report, secret report. The report stated out his purpose of going there. Why are we going there? What's our purpose? And he said, we're going to reinstall our Zhongzuquan. Suzerainty?
Suzerainty.
Yeah, with China. He specifically used this term. So they don't really, even not only Mao wasn't sure what the relationship was, even the nationalists wasn't sure either. So whatever later on, how they want to occupy Tibet, how to want to change Tibet, reform, or whatever they call that, is literally they are walked through going through, crossing the river by feeding stones.
So you think it's impossible right now?
No, definitely there's no way, because it just goes against it.
I just want to explain before you answer who these people are. Liu Wenhui was the governor or warlord under the Kuomintang of the area of Tibet that Rinpoche is from, Sichuan, separate province around that time, Kam in Sichuan. That's Liu Wenhui. But 30 years earlier, Zhao Afeng was the governor, the military leader, and actually the theorist for the late Qing, 1908 to 1911, also in this area. And he was the one who ordered the invasion of Lhasa by the Qing army in 1910. Please, Tom.
The original policy in 1950, in the early 50s, really until 57 at least, certainly by 59 it's gone, is exactly that. It's in the what later became the TAR. The policy was not to disturb the situation, to maintain the situation, and to slowly work with the Tibetans, ally themselves. Somebody here mentioned ally themselves with the Tibetan officials, whatever their status was. That broke down largely because of what happened in eastern Tibet, where that policy didn't exist. And in eastern Tibet, where the Rinpoche is from, the Chinese government came in and disrupted things and changed things and attacked monks for being parasites. And that change created the revolt, which climaxed in 1959. Then in 1980, by the 70s, in fact, The Chinese government is apologizing to the Tibetans for the excesses of the Cultural Revolution. And by the 80s, there is a policy led by Hu Yaobang and Zhao Ziyang to do what Mao was doing in the 50s, was to guarantee Tibetans cultural security. Language, religion, education, all of that stuff first, and then eventually economic development. That broke down too for complicated reasons. There are people in China today, scholars and others, who want to go back to that policy. Unfortunately, they're not in power at the moment, so they don't have much influence. But certainly this is a debate that has gone on since the 50s and continues to this day. I don't think it's impossible. I think it is possible, but of course until it happens, we will never know who's right.
Quick question, final question. Dr. Harvey, yes.
Professor Grunfeld, I wanted to follow up on the mention that you made of possible outside influence in Qinghai. And I know in 2008, when I saw this map as well, people were saying, oh, these are out. Some of the government lines were that this was outside provocateurs who are coming in, and I want to stay objective, and I think, well, could it be? But then I just see this widespread, right? There's just no way.
No,
right?
you're separating 50 years. There's a 50-year gap. I'm talking about the 50s.
Right, exactly. But going
Not
back to the
208.
50s as well, I see Jianglin's numbers. They're so huge. So I'm just curious, with Benno and Jianglin's research, did you see reference in any of the Chinese documents to possible CIA involvement? And there may have been. That was an interesting question to raise. Also, was the rhetoric about imperialism, saving from U.S. imperialism in Qinghai, in that area? I just was curious. Okay.
Yeah, there are references. It's mostly talking about Guomindang airdrops in 1950, 1951, 1952. And in fact, from December 49 through May 1953, you have a series of large uprisings in Qinghai, in Amdo. Some of them led by Mabufang partisans or other Muslim leaders in the region, but often with a lot of cooperation from Tibetan and Mongol leaders. So you have a massive rebellions. The last one by Ma Yuanshang in sort of the Henan Zeku area, or Zekok, has Mongolian and Tibetan headmen who are very active in it. And they have photos of supposed airdrops from Guomindang, Taiwanese, and supposedly they're getting orders from Chiang Kai-shek and Mabufang in Taiwan, for instance. And then they do talk about U.S. influence in this. They don't talk about actual U.S. physical use, but they're behind all of this. And you do have, for instance, in Zekok, you have a large mission that goes to Korea during the war, and then they send back a Tibetan representative from this mission, and he goes and he talks to all the headmen in the Huangnan region, telling about American imperialism and how we in Huangnan have to get together to support the country, to raise our animals, to support the development of China so we can oppose this imperialist presence the United States is posing against us. So it's interesting.
There were a lot of tours in North Korea.
Yeah.
The Chinese brought, after the war, the U.S. Air Force literally bombed almost every single building in North Korea. And after the war, the Chinese brought people from China on tours of North Korea to show what America can do. Now, if these planes existed, and again, I've seen no documents, and I haven't been able to get any from the CIA, they're probably civil air transport, which was a CIA front or airline, later became Air America, and they used a lot of Guomindang pilots. So the connection could very well be there, but we don't have evidence.
Jianglin, do you want to
There's some evidence about the CIA airdrop in the area that is between Qinghai and Tibet. I think that's the last major battle during the 6-year war. And in 1950s, I think we have the same source. And in Taiwan, I found a document. I think Chiang Kai-shek ordered a feasibility study research on the possibility of sending the Taiwan Air Force to help Tibetans in 1960 or 59, they actually did a detailed research, but there's no evidence that they actually acted out.
Do you want to ask if Rinpoche wants to say any final comment just quickly before we finish?
Number so, Purki needs to the so huge sympathy in the national goal.
I'm very happy that all of you know the Tibetan issue so deeply.
And then Purki Lujutola numbers of Shuju, but then Sabunasha, the Shira goal.
And for the fact that you have done very deep and detailed research into Tibetan history.
And then, Namji Chitang Yongra Roche, then up to Matuto and then put a sensitive, the Manche Shan, the Tishini or Mato, the Conde Shirashini or Mother.
The thing that most people sort of generally know about Tibet is that it was invaded in 1956. And that's sort of the general thing people know and not too much else.
Tanda Konge, not too much Konge, to get it and the service huge on the sewing, the Shiraya would do Tangazu, Berkey, Pujivi, Nedante, Ya Tar and Bush huge in the Kanayum, but they so chimba to it, and the kitchen was huge hard, not to Matosum Magazette around this.
The speakers have spoken about the local history of before 1956, and I think that was very useful. And as I have mentioned before, there is 3 generations of suffering and scar that lies behind the Tibetan issue. And this is all, this is information that has been documented and confirmed by later research.